Hello, my name is Dr. Tiffany Jana, and I am the CEO and founder of TMI Consulting Incorporated. My company is a 17-year-old diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy consulting firm, and that just means that my company helps organizations and institutions and communities be more thoughtful about the way that they invite people into their communities. So, if it's a workplace or if it's a school, we want to make sure that everyone who works there and that everyone who is influenced by and affected by that particular place is really able to feel like they can be who they are. They can bring their whole selves into the spaces that they are, and that they're respected and appreciated and able to be successful. So I do this work because my mother actually does the same work. So I grew up watching her do it, and it was pretty amazing to see my mom at work because I felt like she was a superhero. She was making it so that other people could really enjoy the work that they do every day, and I thought that that was really awesome. So I started my own company doing something similar. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to answer for you all about microaggressions because I wrote a book. I wrote a bunch of books, but my fourth book was called Subtle Acts of Exclusion: How to Understand, Identify, and Stop Microaggressions. So I'm a little bit of a microaggressions expert, I guess. And so microaggressions, or subtle acts of exclusion, as I like to call them, SAE for short. Microaggressions are just they are the things that people do and say that make some people feel like they're being otherized, like they're being, pushed aside. And it's a little bit different from like, overt racism or sexism, right? So microaggressions can be problematic for sure, but they tend to be, the reason I call them subtle acts of exclusion is because they tend to be very often not as obvious, right? As something that's just like super duper racist. Not that a microaggression can't be racist or sexist or something like that, but these tend to be kind of subtle. So, for instance, like sometimes people can say something that's supposed to be a compliment, but it's actually a whole microaggression, right? So when I was coming up, people used to say to me, "Oh my gosh, like you I don't even think of you as a black person, Tiffany." Excuse me, what? And so when they said, I don't think of you as a black person, or you don't talk like a black person, what they're actually saying is, you don't fit my stereotype of what a black person is. I don't think of you as a black person because you don't act or show up in ways that I've decided are the ways that I expect black people to show up, whether that's good, bad, or something else. I'm just not fitting their stereotype. And when they say something like, you don't talk like a black person, there's judgment kind of built into that. Like, what are you saying about the way that black people speak, right? So those can be really problematic. So, the interesting thing about microaggressions versus like, maybe racism or sexism or things that they're just like overtly problematic. One thing is, there's different kinds of biases, right? If you have a conscious bias or an overt bias, that means that you know that you like something or don't like something, or you like a certain kind of people and you don't like a certain kind of people. That's something you're aware of. An unconscious bias is something that you are not aware of, like you don't even realize you have it, which is what makes it so, so troublesome. And the deal with microaggressions is that they sometimes map really neatly with our unconscious biases, right? So a person who said, wow, I don't even think of you as a black person, they might not be aware of the fact that they think differently or think less of black people, and as is evidenced by the silly thing that they said, the inappropriate thing they said. Now, the other thing about the difference between a microaggression and just like really problematic intentional behavior is that sometimes when you see people who are, sexist or homophobic or transphobic or something like that, they when they say and they do things, they want to hurt your feelings, right? So like the things that a bully would say, when a bully just says, trans people or whatever, or non-binary is not even real, why did you change your pronouns, right? They're being mean, right? They're just like, they know that they're being mean. And the interesting thing about microaggressions, or SAEs, again, subtle acts of exclusion, is that people might not even like, they don't think that they're being mean, right? And there's a difference between intent and impact. So I can say something and like not mean any harm. Like, people will say, we'll see somebody of Asian descent and they'll be like, oh, like where are you from? And somebody will say like, oh, I'm from New York. No, where are you really from? Like, what flavor of Asian are you? that is not a very appropriate and kind thing to say. Now, they might not have been trying to be insulting. They might genuinely be curious. It doesn't make it an appropriate question, but they didn't mean to cause harm. However, so that's the intent, like whether or not you meant to cause harm or be nice or whatever, that's what you intend, your intentions, the intent. The impact is how it lands on a person. And it doesn't matter what your intention is. If somebody is hurt by it, if someone is offended, if someone thinks it's a microaggression, then it is, right? And so we get hung up as people, we get hung up on the intent. As soon as you say to someone, ew, like that was an inappropriate thing to say, I think that, that's a microaggression, that's not cool. The first thing that normal people will say is, well, I didn't mean it that way, you're just too sensitive, quit crying about it. Well, you might not have meant it that way, but that's how I took it, and my feelings actually matter. So it's a very, very interesting needle to thread, as they say, but it is important to understand the difference. So let's see. So when you are, how do you identify a microaggression in a high school classroom or in a classroom setting? Well, again, if it is something that makes a person feel like they are being excluded and like it is an unkind or inappropriate comment, you have to go with the way that the person feels. Like, there's no like checklist or microaggression meter, right, or specific legislation on the matter. It has to do with how people feel. Just like there's a notion of like harassment, like there's workplace rules and laws about harassment, and one of the things about harassment is it's harassment if the person says it is. Now, there's a whole process that you can go through to see like what level of problematic it is, but it is, anybody who witnesses it, whether it's the victim or just an observer, if it feels icky, then it gets investigated, or it should get investigated. And the same thing is with a microaggression. If a person, particularly when they have some kind of, underrepresented identity. So if you're BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, or Person of Color. So if you're, ethnic minority, racial minority, gender minority, female, non-binary, trans, LGBTQ, maybe an immigrant or of immigrant descent, right? Any of these things, differently abled, all of these things are the kinds of things that, because in our history we have treated some people badly, those are considered, a lot of those are considered protected categories. And so when somebody says something that kind of steps in one of those areas, that's like a red flag. And if the person says that they're hurt, then they're hurt. Like there's no argument to be had. It doesn't matter what the person's intent was. That's an opportunity for that person to grow. So the different kinds of microaggressions are all different kinds, many different kinds. But I'm cheating. I'm cheating from this very good book, Subtle Acts of Exclusion. That's it. Myself and Michael Barron wrote it. And so we wrote different types of, like, we categorize SAEs into different types. You're invisible. You're inadequate. You or people like you are inadequate. You're not an individual. You don't belong. You're not normal. You're a curiosity. You're a threat, or you're a burden. So most microaggressions will fall under some of these categories, right? And that's where, it gets kind of sticky. So when you see a microaggression, so you don't have to be, we call the person who starts it the initiator, the SAE initiator, and the person who is on the receiving end or the hurt side of it is the subject of the SAE, or subtle act of exclusion. And so when you don't have to be the subject to respond to it. Like, one of the kindest things that you can do is be an ally. And when you see that this microaggression happened, and you'll know because you'll be like, ooh, that was inappropriate, then you can actually like stand up and say something. So if you're comfortable saying something in the moment to the initiator, then you can say, hey man, that wasn't cool. Like, I'm sure that Catherine didn't really appreciate that you used that term, whatever. So if you can speak up in that moment and defend the person, great. If you're not comfortable because the person is a bully or they've got some kind of power, you can always enlist the support of someone else. You can go to an adult, a teacher, if it's a workplace, a human resources department. If it's an upper, if it's like college or something, you can go to a counselor or something like that, right? There's lots of different people you can go to and say, hey, I witnessed this thing, don't know what to do with it, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't cool. Can you help me out? So get help from other people. And then the other thing that you can do is just find the subject at a later point and just check in with them and make sure they're okay. And you can be like, hey, Catherine, I saw that thing that Joe said. I'm really sorry. That didn't seem okay to me. Are you okay? So check in with the person. So if you are the person who is on the receiving end, so if you're the subject, you have to recognize that in that moment, you're going to drop into something called your flight or fight mentality. And it actually becomes very difficult for you to respond like carefully and in your right mind because you've gotten into an emotional place. So generally speaking, it's a good idea to get distance between you and the incident, and all the good things that, like, maybe your parents or grandparents or caretaker or teachers have told you over time about calming down. All of that is stuff that you use in this moment. So whether it's, counting to 10 slowly, taking deep breaths, going for a short walk, whatever you have to do to get distance between you and that person, you and that incident, that's a good idea, right? Because what it does actually, like, it's not just like calms you down on the surface level. It actually pulls the functioning of your brain, your thoughts, into the part of your brain that makes rational and intelligent choices, because you don't want to be responding to someone who's just offended you from a really emotional place. That doesn't tend to go well. So um, definitely, and if you're in a position where you can't get away at all, like you can't escape the person, then one of the things that you might want to do is ask yourself questions like, what am I feeling right now? Why am I responding? Am I responding to this person, or like, is there a particular thing that happened to me that's making me think of this in a different kind of way? When you start interrogating your own thoughts, it causes you it's like the hack to force you back up into your higher mind. Now, it's not foolproof, because we can also psych ourselves into feeling more emotional about something. So that's like the last resort. First resort, get the heck out of there, go for a walk, count to 10, go chat with a friend, breathe, etc. Okay. And then what you want to do is, if you're in a more power position, so let's say you're like a senior or something, or you're the head of the basketball team, or you're very popular, or your relationships go across lots of different things, people listen to you, you're tall, you're able-bodied, let's say you have just different kinds of privileges. For whatever reason, you're not having a crappy time of life, right? If you're not having just a generally crappy time navigating through your networks and through school and stuff, well, then when you see these things happen, you have a stronger position to be able to call them out, but in a good way. We actually call it calling in, right? So you never want to be like, hey, you're a jerk, you said that thing and it was hateful. Like, no, we don't want to do that, because the reality about SAEs and microaggressions is that we have all committed them, like, and it doesn't matter whether you are differently abled, or you're BIPOC, or whatever, transgender, LGBT. We've all committed them. We've all committed them when we did not mean to, right? And the reality is that no matter how much work you do, you're gonna do it again. And so when it's your turn to call someone in and say, hey, you may not, I'm sure you don't realize that you did this, but I just want to let you know that you said this thing, you did this thing that I think was hurtful to somebody, and I think that you should maybe go check on them, right? When you do that, you want to do it bearing in mind that next time it might be you. So call them in a way that you would want to be called in. Like, do you want to be called in front of all your peers, in front of everybody? Probably not. Nice thing to do is pull someone aside and be like, hey, look, I'm not trying to drag you or anything, but you used the term retarded, right? And you probably didn't even realize you did it, but we try to treat each other with respect at the school, or whatever the case may be. Like, whatever you can say to just make them aware of it. And you can say, you know what, I used to use that word too. I know it's hard to stop using it. And that's probably not the best example for you guys. That's a word that we grew up with that was hard, but you guys, I think, probably are better than us, more culturally fluent. But whatever it is, to be able to say, and if it's true for you to say, I remember this one time when, I did something similar, or said something similar, and I wish someone had told me because I did it a few times, whatever, anything you can do to make them feel like, they're okay. And remember, you never want to attack their character. You don't want to imply that they're a bad person because they made a mistake, because they committed an SAE, right? Or initiated an SAE. You want to, what you want to call into question is the behavior, right? Separate the behavior from the character of the person. Don't assassinate their character. Just say, hey, I noticed that you said this thing, and I know you're a really nice guy, John, right? But that thing that you said, I think that might have been a little hurtful. Like, I know it would have been hurtful had that been me who, you said that about, or whatever. Okay. And then, when you are a person who, is often, so if you're underrepresented identity, so I myself, I'm intersectional, right? So I have 5 different underrepresented demographics that I represent. So I'm Black, right? I'm assigned female at birth, but I identify as non-binary, which makes me a gender minority. I have invisible disabilities. English was not my first language. And what is the other one? I'm suddenly blanking. I have so many that I can't even remember. Oh, LGBTQ. Okay. So I've got 5 intersectional identities. And when that's the case, that's like 5 times the opportunities for subtle acts of exclusion to just, whoop, come out of nowhere, always getting me. So when that happens, you've got to take really good care of yourself. Being a human is hard, okay? And you want to have, you want to have grace for yourself. You want to have grace for other people. And you just want to, if you have been on the receiving end of a microaggression, don't hold it in, because, that's that kind of stuff. It builds up over time, and it can, you don't want to end up building a hard armor, an outer shell that no one can penetrate. You want to maintain, a soft and kind heart, and you want to maintain the ability to be in good relationship with people. And just because some folks are unaware of their, flying off at the mouth and saying any old dumb thing, should not cause you to become less available as a person to other people. So don't hold it in. You want to have a conversation. Have a conversation with people you trust, right? With your friends. And as an ally, if you happen to not be any of those underrepresented demographics, right? Then, if a BIPOC friend or a differently abled friend or a, LGBTQ friend comes to you and says, man, somebody said this thing, they did this thing, and it really sucked. And, I think it's because of my identity. Don't ever say, no, I don't think it is. It's probably not that. They're good people. No, if somebody who is, who represents something that you do not, an experience that you don't have and can never have, don't invalidate their experience. Their experience is their experience. How they perceive it is how they perceive it. Just be there for them emotionally, because it's exhausting. It is utterly exhausting to be on the receiving end of this stuff all the time. So if it's you who's on the receiving end, be gentle with yourself. Like, do some like self-care. So, whether you like drawing pictures or riding a bike or going for a walk, or, you're reading some anime, or, whatever, manga. I don't know if you read anime. As you read manga, you watch anime, whatever it is that you do, right? To put a smile on your face and to feel good, like, do that. And you just kind of like, you got to just like, just stroke the heart chakra and be like, it's going to be all right, right? That person's behavior is not a reflection of who you are. It's not a reflection of your value as a person. It's a reflection of their lack of awareness and their lack of cultural fluency. And the reason that we want to call people in and let them know when they do that is we want to be able to help them increase their cultural fluency so they don't keep doing that kind of stuff to people. And remember, at some point it will be you again. So be gentle with yourself and be gentle with others. So, they have asked me for, let's see, a golden nugget of guidance on this topic. And I think I already gave it to you, right? It is that have grace for yourself and grace for others. None of us is immune. I'm a whole like microaggression, diversity and inclusion expert. And what I tell people is that every single day, I mess up with this stuff. Like, I don't get it right all the time. But what I recognize is that I know that I'm going to mess up, and I catch myself when I mess up, and I apologize. So if I've accidentally hurt someone, or I've said a thing, or I've misgendered someone, or whatever the case, I will just say, whoa, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. And, are you okay? I will do better next time. And, let me know how I can do better next time. And it's okay. Like, I think in our society, we have like privileged this like competitive perfection. Everyone's got to be amazing and awesome and the best at everything. And no, being a human being means that you're going to mess up, that your journey should be a learning journey, and you should feel good about learning. And those opportunities, those times when people call you in and say, hey, not cool, man, not cool person, not cool sibling, you shouldn't, like, not that you shouldn't, but I want you to see those moments as an opportunity to grow and learn, and recognize, particularly if someone is coming from an identity or representation that you don't have access to, it's a gift. Like, it's a deeply spiritual and sacred gift if somebody is willing to put their, reputation on the line, put their name on the line, and just be really vulnerable. It's embarrassing to be like, hey, I didn't like this. Like, nobody wants to be that person. But it's such a gift when they do. And instead of getting defensive and being like, well, that's not how I meant it, that's your dumb fault because blah, 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 right? Because you're having feelings and go deal with them. No, what you want to do is you want to stop and say, I'm sorry. Um, Thank you for making me aware of this. And what can I do? Because I want to be better next time. Like, how can I make this better? Or what could I have said that would have been more appropriate, or whatever it is. But move into curiosity, move in a place of wanting to understand why you caused harm. Because at the end of the day, if somebody calls you in about a microaggression or an SAE, it means that you hurt someone. It may not have been like, you clobbered him in the head with a baseball bat. No, it's not a wound that you can see. You hurt their heart. You hurt their spirit. And you know what we know about wounds? A lot of the wounds that happen at the physical level, that we can fix them. We can heal them. The stuff that happens when people hurt your feelings, that stuff can last a lifetime. And the more it happens, the more it adds up and it eats away at us. And so when you've been told that you've hurt someone, you need to take that seriously, right? And learning how to be more culturally fluent and learning how to be culturally humble, and intellectually humble, where you can receive information, feedback that says you didn't do the best thing. You didn't win this round, but you can win next round, right? You can do better next round. The more you get into the habit of cultivating that, like, that self-improvement, that curiosity and that willingness to learn and that willingness to take accountability for the harm that you've caused, you are going to have the best relationships, like, as an adult. As you grow more and more into who you are becoming, you're going to have stronger relationships. They're going to last longer. They're going to be resilient. You'll learn how to be patient and empathetic, and like, you'll have so much less drama than other people, because instead of like always defending your position, you'll be able to actually feel what people are feeling, listen to them when they talk to you, and understand where they're coming from. So every time you get called in and every time you call someone in, these are learning opportunities. And we could avoid this whole cancel culture. Like, no one wants to get canceled. Every time you listen, when someone calls you in about something, you're avoiding being canceled sometime in the future out of sheer ignorance about somebody else's culture. So yeah. So anyway, I've written four, let's see, the books on the topic for you all. So if I was going to say 11th and 12th grade students or young folks, the books that I've written on the topic: Overcoming Bias, my first book, How to Build Authentic Relationships Across Differences. Erasing Institutional Bias would be more appropriate for like when you're getting ready to like start work. So I would say Overcoming Bias and this book, Subtle Acts of Exclusion, would be great books for you to read in terms of my resources. And then if you want to know more about like anti-racism, I would read Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Ibram X. Kendi's book, Stamped. So he's got a YA book called Stamped that is really, really extraordinary. So anyway, I hope that this helps. You can certainly follow me on all social media. I'm most active on Instagram at Tiffany Jana. I've also got a YouTube channel, and that's a YouTube show with all kinds of playlists, and it's Life with Doc Jana. So anyway, hope that you're well. Have grace for yourself, have grace for others, and be well.